Greetings and welcome to a new edition of the Masek Report. Our topic of interest for today is the American obsession with fad, fashion, and newness. I'm your host, Carl Bodner, and with me today are three panelists who will share a conversation about multiple topics related to this cultural obsession. Jessica Hirschbeck, presently an interning student teacher at Masek, Junior Catherine Simonek, and Junior Gretchen Bonaska. Allow me to preface our discussion by asking if we can agree that fashion is something that has longevity because it keeps adapting to social changes. My first thought example is a male's blue blazer. A blue blazer has been around for decades and decades. If you don't own a suit, if you go with the traditional blue blazer and gray slacks, it becomes totally formal and acceptable. And there are other items like that. They may alter a little bit by the width of the lapel or whether it's 2-button or 3-button, but it's still basically the core. Our fashion for such a short period as Crocs, okay? They started in Canada and quickly spread into the U.S. They profited $168 million in 2007 and then lost $185 million in 2008. One might even take a look nowadays at Uggs. 3 years ago, probably 9 of every 10 young women in this building would be wearing a pair of Uggs. Now, it's an unusual thing to see them again. So we have to agree about this, and I think we all should agree that Americans have a cultural instinct to consume as well as an inherent drive for newness. We are just fascinated with newness. Is this something that you folks might, or one of you folks might agree with? Catherine, let you start.
I do agree that we have this instinct because, like, as you were just to give an example, it made me think of with the Uggs. I was one of those girls in 9th grade who was wearing the Uggs every day. And now they just sit in the back of my closet and I wear them to go in the snow or something, like ruin them. Like, I don't care.
Out to get the mail.
Yeah, exactly. And I do agree that this is an instinct of ours just because of the fact that we grow up with these, like us personally, the three girls here, with technological advancements, with commercials and all that, with so many of these commercials just thrown at us every day on everything we do and see everywhere we go on the internet and such. It's just instinct to look at it, to want to buy it because they're telling us, like, oh, it's a good sale, it's a great sale, like, this was $300, now it's $19.99. Like, how true is that? How true is it? But we still believe it, and we buy these things by instinct.
Gretchen, are you in agreement?
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And kind of go back to what you were saying before about how, like, the core of any sort of fashion trend kind of stays with us. With Uggs, now it's moccasins with the fur on the inside, which I'm wearing right now.
Me too.
And so that's kind of stayed with us, whereas you don't see the boots anymore, you see, like, the same sort of shoe with fur on the inside. And so obviously the trends, while they change a little bit with the actual product, they sort of stay with you.
So 3 years from now, you might come back to Masek, and there'll be no one wearing those
Right.
moccasins.
Exactly.
Right.
Probably.
There probably won't be, but there'll be some sort of other fur shoe for people to wear.
You got it,
Yeah.
you know, and if I believe it doesn't just extend to shoes.
Right, like
You
jeans
got
the same way.
You got it. So what do you think, Jess?
I totally agree with all of you guys. I think that there are definitely pieces that become staples in a wardrobe, like blue jeans. Then there's also a lot of cycles that come around with different items that become popular and trendy. But I think even things like jeans, they find a way to change. Sometimes ripped is cool, sometimes like a frayed bottom, different lengths, or even, I know when I was younger, bell bottoms were really cool. But those are from the 60s. So again, that was another like cycle that came back around. So I think that I definitely agree.
Well, when my older daughter was a junior and senior at Masek back in '82 and '83, the ripped and cut jeans were in style. I mean, it was a big thing. And then they just kind of disappeared from the market scene. And I think it becomes interesting of what is it within us that this intuitive need emerges. Why does that occur? And is it more dominant with women than it is with men? I'm not so sure about that. What do you think? You think guys probably are just as guilty?
In their own way, because I know, I don't want to stereotype, but I know like lots of guys are really into sneakers and different sneaker brands that come out. So especially those as they change in style.
Maybe different items, but the
Right.
same concept.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like it's harder for them, though, to have to deal with it, just because, me personally, I don't think they have as much of a selection as we do as far as clothes and
That's
fashion
true.
goes. So I feel like they probably would be just as instinctive as us, but maybe not as often just because of the lack of choice.
But do you
Yeah,
think they're
fashion.
very, very devoted in terms of brand? Like,
Oh,
who
yes.
wants to be the
Yes,
guy at Massac who doesn't have
definitely.
an Under Armour T-shirt?
Right.
Yeah, or like Yeezys or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Nike sneakers.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
so there's that, I think that mode in there in terms of they identify with that. Or is it that it allows us to better identify ourselves with ourselves? That we look in the mirror and I see that Under Armour and it's like, yes, now I'm accepted, now I'm part of the real thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was going to bring that up, that idea that we follow instinctively, because if we don't, we're looked at as if we are something different, like an anomaly to society. Like if I was wearing a 1950s dress right now, people would be staring at me and like, what are you doing? Why are you wearing that?
You know, you talked about the sneakers before, the All-Stars and the Converse. And I've mentioned this to a number of students. When I was a young person, that's all there was. There were no Nikes. And it became a big deal. You either had black or you had white, just like today. Although now they're starting to add more colors. And then when they came out with the low cuts, well, that became really big. The white low cuts became really fashionable. And for me, at 70 years of age, it is comical to see so many kids around Massac High School and outside of Massac High School. And that, I don't know what they're paying for it nowadays, but I'm sure they're paying a lot more than we paid back then.
And I agree, at almost 30, I see now, I was in high school over 10 years ago, and I see now the girls come in with choker necklaces, scrunchies, Adidas sneakers, and that's all stuff that we wore probably when I was in middle school. But it's funny how that stuff comes back around. It's really a lot of 90s style that's coming back now.
It is.
Yeah, I had a scrunchie in my hair earlier today, so
Yeah, me too.
that's
I
very
have it in my
true.
backpack right now.
Yeah,
I would have liked to have been the person that thought that up.
exactly.
The woman who thought that up wanted to raise extra money so she could put her daughter through college. So she started with just a display in the walking area of a mall.
Really.
And here she was taking these raggedy pieces of cloth with elastic, stitching it,
Scraps probably.
boom, and it took off like crazy. So you never know. I mean, it's just the spontaneity within our market and within this whole thing of design. And I also think it's ironic that, young people aren't coming out with these. It's older persons, even middle-aged persons, who are deciding to put that out there. And what is it they're sensing or recognizing in the wants of the young, that the young will say, oh, wow, that's so awesome, I got to get that. And I don't want to be the last one getting it. So it's going to be interesting. So I wonder how that's going to come along. And we're just, Juliet Shore wrote an interesting book several years ago called Born to Buy. And I think it's one of the truest stories about the American ego than anything I can imagine. You might even enjoy looking that up sometime. Well, that leads me to ask another one. Do you think Americans tend to buy out of boredom?
Definitely. Especially, I see this in like the technological market. As soon as a new iPhone comes out, there's at least half the kids at the school that go and get a new one, just for like the different features it might have, even though it doesn't necessarily make a phone better in the sense of how it works as an actual cell phone. But just like the small little changes to whatever Apple's done makes it that much more appealing.
True. That's very true.
Yeah.
And just like overall with online shopping, like not just technology, like anything, it's more accessible now. It's quicker to buy it. There's so much you can get because you have like access to the entire world. It's not just your mall. Like online shopping is getting more and more popular, and that makes it so much easier to just sit at home when you're bored, go on your computer, click a few things, buy a few things, wait for it to come.
I agree. I think it's a lot about opportunity as well as boredom. When I used to work in retail, all the girls, we would sit there and try on all the new clothes, and we would have downtime when the store wasn't busy, and all we would do was shop. And it's the same thing at having it in the computer, right at your fingertips. If you have downtime, you're on your computer, what are you doing? Surfing your favorite store's website.
So sometimes we may not even know what we're looking for. So we're just exploring and searching
No
until
specific
something
thing.
strikes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I don't want to be impolite, but is this kind of silly?
Definitely. I think it is silly. I mean, I think as I get older, I've been seeing that a lot of things sit in my closet, or I wear them once, I think it's the best thing, and then I buy it and I wear it once and I never wear it again. Or even things, sadly, still have tags on them. So I think now I try and say, oh, I have a wedding to go to. Let me see if I can reuse a dress that I had from a few years ago or borrow from a friend. But there's still that part of me that doesn't want to be photographed twice in the same thing either. You know?
So hence the newness.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're very gratified by having something new as often as possible. I think that's an interesting ego factor, perhaps. I'm not sure, but it definitely has a mystique to it. Do you think our market economy bombards us with messages announcing that we need to spend as frequently as possible in order to keep up? I mean, it's consumer competition, I guess. I don't know. So what would your response be to that?
Well, the whole idea of having so much commercials thrown at us and everything that we do online through YouTube. There's an ad every few minutes depending on the length of the video. Then also, even on a random website, there's columns of ads next to things. We hear it on the radio every day, the TV. It's just everywhere, and it's hard to avoid it. And the way, and everything we do, I see it everywhere. Billboards, everywhere you go.
But does it ever bother you that you get these mammoth numbers of messages?
Yes.
It does, and I feel like now we're hearing all this talk about these technology companies such as Facebook, Instagram having algorithms where they can track what you're clicking on, so they're catering even more to your specific needs. So if I go on a website looking for a specific pair of shoes, I might start seeing ads for that company, which is more enticing, I think, and they're definitely trying to cater instead of just putting random ads to your specific wants and needs.
Do you witness the same thing?
Yeah, and especially with ads nowadays, they make everything so superficial in them, and everything's like perfect, and it presents you this like perfect product, and it makes you want it that much more because everything is just set up like phenomenally.
Is there ever any post-purchase disappointment?
Yes, when I was prom dress shopping, I was talking to a girl who had just purchased a prom dress online. She showed me the picture, beautiful dress, for $80, and it was such cheap material, and it was awful. So she was running around trying to find a prom dress the day before this big event or something at an actual store where she could buy something more expensive but better quality. But so
And
much
she could try it on.
Exactly.
That, as a guy, that kind of is mind-boggling for me. I don't know. Do you witness these kinds of things as well?
Yeah, I see buyer's remorse a lot from people. Like I said before, when you buy something and you think it's going to be perfect with your wardrobe, or then you get home and it doesn't match anything you have and you end up not wearing it and it hangs in your closet. And a lot of times things are final sale, or you can't return them, or you're hoping that somehow you're going to find some way to wear it or fit it in your wardrobe, but sometimes it doesn't work out. That's why I think it's nice to replenish your basics and spend money on those things instead of things that are trendy or fads.
So if you can't find that substitute dress or whatever, does that put you into a dilemma where you say, okay, let me go out and buy some compliments. I don't need another pair of shoes, but I'll go get another pair of shoes.
Definitely.
Yeah. Guilty as charged, yes.
So
Never have enough shoes.
I think that's an interesting phenomenon. I mean, a male basically could get by with 3 pairs of shoes. As long as you got black and you got brown, you got one other thing, boom, that's it. But we market to the women in such a fashion that it's impossible for you guys to just have 3. You can't do it.
True, yeah.
It won't
Right.
work. So I think this becomes a real interesting dilemma. And Thurston Veblen wrote a very famous essay decades ago. He was a very famous sociology economist. And he had a very important chapter called Conspicuous Consumption. that Americans are a people who consume for the sake of consuming. Would you argue that he's right and that's more true, if not more true than ever before?
Yes, definitely. I would definitely agree with that.
You?
Yeah, well, from U.S. history this year, we actually learned about how when in the Gilded Age, when industrialism was really on the rise, how the super rich and captains of industry of their time were buying all these things to put in their houses, to put in their yards, all these huge mansions and things to go along with it, just for show. So like that conspicuous consumption, well, there's not as many like super rich as there were during that time. There's certainly, everyone's now has the ability to just buy things just for show. So it's definitely still around.
And even the reality TV shows like the HGTV shows, and even ones like Housewives, where they're all in foreclosure, but on the shows they're buying these huge homes and extravagant outfits to wear, and et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of them, almost one from every series, is in foreclosure, bankruptcy, or getting in trouble for overspending. So it's just all for show.
Do you see the same evidence? Are you aligned with this?
No, I definitely do, and I think it's kind of awful in a way that we're so instinctively just consumers. Like we've just been made up to be consumers, and that's when people like run into trouble. Like I think in one of the articles was talking about this. Someone was saying that their credit score is fine because they realized the error and the failure that consuming so much and doing something such as that when you're in a bad place isn't going to be good for you in the end. So I think a lot of people fall into that like credit card debt and all of that. And they don't realize what they're doing because we just instinctively want to buy at the moment.
And even though we so often just target you younger people, it's not just you guys, right? I mean, you look at, there's a ton of adults out there, it's the same idea. But one of the interesting things, I think, in terms of history, is when you go back in time, the upper socioeconomic classes were the fashion setters, okay? In your lifetime, it's been the lower socioeconomic populations. Middle-class kids in Easton and Monroe, boys, did not decide, let's wear baggy jeans hanging off our butts and, we'll be cool. But that's how they dressed. And so you have this interesting flip in terms of, who and where do these design changes, these material wants and needs emerge from? And I think that's kind of an interesting question. Now, what about this? Do you think we can make a similar argument regarding our health and food when people join all these clubs, go through revolving diets, have to go to Panera's because there's no other bread you can eat? What do you think of that?
I definitely think that's true, and I'm definitely guilty of that myself. I don't usually follow the diet strictly, but I'll say I want to eat healthier, so I'll look to Whole30 or Paleo for recipes and try and incorporate them in. But there are people that take them really strict, and I see there's Instagram blogs about it, new recipe books, and people become really obsessed with it. And they do it so strictly that they sometimes don't realize that there's health risks involved. And I mean, even with going to a restaurant now, every restaurant I go to has these superfoods on the menu. Kale, Brussels sprouts. You would never see that on a menu even a few months or years ago. And now they have Brussels sprouts, although sometimes they're with bacon or fried, but they're still on the menu, and they're this new fad food. And I think that those change as well.
I think bacon has, if nothing else, become the #1 flavor instrument in food preparation. And a lot of that really kicked off with the introduction of the bacon burger in 1995, where, we put it on everything now. We put it in salads, we put it on sandwiches, we mix it with, everything. And the same thing with sriracha. It was I believe, a Vietnamese immigrant who came here in the 80s and started selling this seasoning that he developed out of his van. And now you can even get sriracha flavored ice cream, which blows me.
It's everywhere.
And you can even get bacon flavored ice cream. I don't know that I'd want it,
It doesn't sound very good.
but
Yeah, I wouldn't like it.
evidently there's people who do. So you have this really interesting phenomena. And so I think this whole thing is all oriented toward this consumption obsession. And on one hand, though, can we say it's actually good because it stimulates economy, it stimulates spending, and it stimulates recycling. When I was your age, there would not be a Goodwill store in Westport, but now there is. The more affluent places, even Monroe, has a very successful Goodwill store. And so, that's a replenishment. So if you're looking at it strictly from an economic point of view, I don't know. Is this a good way to be? What do you think?
I would say in some ways it is because, as you said, it definitely helps to replenish the economy, and like you can pass things on to people who may need them more than you once you're done with them, like Goodwill. But also, like I was reading an article and it said like there was this lady and she was in her late 20s and she was married and she was like, and she had all these possessions, but she was like, I have nothing that I really want to pass down to like my future children. So, because she like kept buying and then like giving away, so she had nothing really sentimental. So in a way, like buying and recycling all the time might like hurt you in the end because you might not have any like sentimental things to pass on if that's what's important to you.
So that feeds into our obsession over newness.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I agree with Gretchen. Like, I think that it is good in an economic aspect, but as far as personal like aspects go, it's very hurtful just because, like Gretchen said, we just have that tendency to buy things and throw them away because we don't care enough to fix things anymore. We don't care enough to keep it and just reuse it. We're too afraid to be in an Instagram picture twice with the same shirt or something.
That's true.
Why? Like, I don't know, just what people think of for some reason. And that's why like we're so obsessed with newness. I feel like social media just kind of amplifies that because you don't want to be seeing the same thing. But like if you're not seen, if you know you're not seen by the people you want to be seen by in it, you're like, I can wear it again. Doesn't matter.
And now there's all these Instagram fashion bloggers that go on and promote their clothing and even host ads for different companies that contact them that they get paid to do that. And there's also apps like Poshmark where you can go on and sell your old things so you have money to buy new things, which I think is interesting too.
So this is stretching beyond just clothing and makeup and style, but even into furnishings.
Definitely.
Oh, definitely. Home goods.
So it's rather interesting to speculate, where will this lead us to? And will we ever get to a point where we can actually define what enough is? My personal argument is that there's never enough. I always find it interesting when people say, I don't need to be rich, I just want to be comfortable. And then you ask them to define what comfortable means. And in many cases, you better have a heck of a lot of money to get to that comfortable stature of living. So we'll have to close our discussion at this time. And I want to thank Jessica and Gretchen and Catherine for participating in this and sharing your thoughts. And I also want to thank the audience for joining us. We hope you found this was somewhat interesting and perhaps entertaining, and you'll join us for the next broadcast of the Masick Report. Be well all.